Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the show, we'll discuss the arena proposal. Consumer reporter Lance Haver will share ethical holiday shopping tips. And Vanessa Maria Graber will share her report from last week's immigration rally. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. And Lance, how are you?
I'm all right. Holiday season, so it's always busy and exciting. And it's nice to see so many people in Center City and on the shopping strips. For all those people who thought Philadelphia was dead after COVID, probably a pleasant surprise to see all the people shopping on the streets.
That's right. That's right.
Plus, the
So,
Christmas Village is kind of neat. So,
yep. Okay. So, Denise, we're having a little more trouble. Can you maybe get your volume up a little bit more?
um,
So what we're gonna lead off tonight with the biggest thing in the city, the thing we've been talking about for a while, the arena. Last week, if you read Hall Monitor's newsletter, you saw some of the information about the arena and the legislative package that was moved from committee and had first reading last week. That means tomorrow, if it gets the same number of votes that it received last week, the legislation will pass and will be binding. So the big question is, what's in the legislation and how did we get here? So let's start with the how we got here. This process began actually under the Kenney administration. Kenney administration kind of pushed it off to the Parker administration, and we've been really following this since Parker took office. About 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, Mayor Parker said she supported the plan. The legislation was written when she said she supported the plan and was transmitted to council. That legislation was given a 30-day review period by the sponsor, Councilmember Mark Squilla. And once that period was over, the hearings began. And Denise, you and I were at those hearings.
every single one of them.
So what stood out to you from those
Probably,
hearings?
probably what stood out about the hearings to me was the organization of the opposition to this plan. No matter what happens ultimately with the stadium, with the arena, the Save Chinatown Coalition let you know in no uncertain terms that they did not want this arena anywhere near their neighborhood. And they were there, they were constant. And there were even a couple of times where I was on the train to my Greenville, because when you're hearing like drums and pots and stuff, you know, being banged very, very loudly while people are shouting, you can take the train to my Greenville. But they let you know in no uncertain terms that they did not want this arena there. Unfortunately for them, and this is something that everybody needs to remember about city council. It doesn't matter what you say in public comment if you don't have 9 council members to back you up.
Mhm.
And that, unfortunately, for the Save Chinatown Coalition, they only got 5 consistently. We don't know what's going to happen when Thursday's vote is taken, because anything can happen. Folks can decide that, okay, we passed it out of committee, but we're looking at this deal in retrospect, and I put deal in quotes, and decide that we don't like it, that we don't like the terms, that we don't like what has been negotiated, and we're going to change our vote. That doesn't usually happen, but it could. And you know, if I'm the folks from the Save Chinatown Coalition, until the absolute last moment, I'm trying to get that 9. I'm trying to get those additional 4 council members to come around to my way of thinking. I think that they concentrated more on the outside, from, the outside protest than they did the inside lobbying, while the unions and the people who were for this project did the exact opposite. They didn't really do a lot of speaking in public comment. You had some people that would chant "build it" on occasion, and you had that kind of thing. But those folks were working the person's offices. They were doing that work. They were trying to get their nine. So I'm hoping that no matter what happens with this is a civics lesson for everybody who wants to make their government more accountable to them. You got to have inside people and outside people, not just outside people.
Right. Um, the biggest surprise last week to me happened from Wednesday into Thursday. So Wednesday, Denise, we were there. That was supposed to be the committee of the whole meeting where they were going to approve the legislation. At 9 o'clock, they gavelled the committee of the whole in the session and said, we're recessing until 4 o'clock. So we were there all day. At 4 o'clock, they came back and said, we're going to recess until 8:30 tomorrow morning. Now, be that as it may, the crucial thing happened when council was not in session to me. The council president's office gave us a copy on the record of what they were hoping the community benefits agreement amendment would be. And what we had been hearing leading up to it was $75 million for the community benefits agreement, possibly on its way to $100 million by credible sources.
Yes.
So we were expecting somewhere between 75 and 100 million, especially on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So let me give you, and I have these in the Homeowner newsletter from last week, but I just want to run through these again really quick. There are 4 things I highlighted: the Arena Special Services District, housing support, the Business Disruption Fund, and the Chinatown Land Trust. I think those are 4 crucial elements of this package. In the document we were given on Wednesday, the Arena Special Services District was going to be funded with $20,500,000. Housing support was going to be $12 million for affordable housing. The Business Disruption Fund, which is crucial for the businesses in Chinatown to, be able to weather all this construction that's going to be happening, that number was $10 million. And the Chinatown Land Trust, which hopefully help prevent the onset of gentrification, was $5 million. That was on Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, we get into City Council bright and early for the 8:30 gaveling of the Committee of the Whole. They passed the legislation. We get the CBA. Remember, we think between $75 and $100 million. The CBA is $60 million. That's the final number. Sometime between Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, between $15 and $40 million was lost. And here's what happened to those 4 crucial items I had mentioned. The Arena Special Services District, which was over $20 million, gets brought down to $17,500,000, $3 million less. Housing support goes from $12 million to $3 million. The Business Disruption Fund gets cut in half from $10 million to $5 million. And the Land Trust goes from $5 million to $250,000.
Wow.
I don't know how this happened.
Well, here's the thing. That is why, in a nutshell, you do not go to a car dealership with Mark Squilla. When I saw the deal, it reminded me of the time that my late twin brother Dennis and I went shopping for a car. I bought my last car with cash, so I didn't know how the whole financing thing works. So my dad, in his eminent wisdom, said, "Hey, take your brother." So I took my brother, and we walked into the car dealership, and I wanted a Geo Metro, which, for those of you who are children of the 90s, Geo Metro was like a collaboration between Suzuki and Chevrolet for a car with like foreign car reliability at American prices. So these cars, on average, you pay maybe on the top end $150 a month. My brother walks into the car dealership, looks the car dealer in the eye, and says she can pay $250 a month for a car. No matter what I did to try to bring this down, I was met with opposition, and I ended up paying $259.60 a month. And I remember this because I was traumatized by it, for a Geo Metro. This is basically the equivalent of what Council Member Mark Squilla did to Council President Kenyatta Johnson when he tried to get more money from this deal. Because he had said in the papers to reporters that the deal only needed another $10 million to pass, which would have brought it from $50 million to $60 million. That's all the Sixers heard. They heard, "Oh, good, $10 million. We can do that." And there was no way they were going to get them up beyond $60 million. So basically, the city of Philadelphia for the next 30 years is going to be doing the equivalent of paying $259.60 a month for a Geo Metro.
Yeah. And when you break the numbers down, it's really only $2 million a year on average.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And the thing is, if they just gave the city the $148 million that they are currently spending to keep Joel Embiid in a Sixers uniform for another 3 or 4 years, if they had just given that $148 million, a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, Larry, and even the one thing that I really wanted to see happen, the Food Insecurity Fund for $5 million, which got completely cut out of the deal. Those things could have been put in the, put in the pot, and really this could have come a lot closer to being an actual community benefits agreement. But because Mark Squilla told, the Sixers and a whole bunch of reporters by extension that $10 million was all he needed, $10 million was all they got. Now, the mayor's office has put $20 million into an affordable housing trust, but that basically takes the whole, well, they're not going to need any city money for this thing, and renders it into a lie, because that $20 million didn't come from the Sixers, it came from the city.
Right. And Councilmember Johnson, when we spoke to him afterwards, said, "Well, this is really an $80 million deal." And the answer is it's not.
No, it's not.
It's $20 million in taxpayer dollars that, are we even sure you're going to get it? It's like a handshake agreement.
It's actually worse in many ways, because while they talk about the Sixers giving 60 million, they don't talk about what the city is giving the owners of the Sixers. It's not the team. They're not giving anything to the team. It goes to the team owners, who are billionaires. Really very smart business people. But here's what they get. They get almost a whole block of land for free. They get excused from paying real estate taxes for 30 years. They will pay something instead of that. Instead of paying the roughly $50 million a year they'd have to pay in real estate taxes, they pay $5 million. They're excused from paying what's called a use and occupancy tax. And for that, they're also getting an additional subsidy of close to $40 million a year. So when you think about this as a community benefit agreement, what you're really looking at is an agreement by the city to let the Sixers slide on property taxes, slide on use and occupancy taxes, to be given an incredible value of land, to close an entire street, to give them that land, to really destroy the train station, the SEPTA stop, which we call the Jefferson stop now, the entire, as the architectural critic of the Inquirer points out, it goes from that beautiful, lofty, light-filled room into basically a tunnel because the arena will be on top of it. So the city is giving the team owners all of these things, and in exchange, the team owners say, well, we're giving you a benefit. But it's not a benefit. It's not even 1/10 of the breaks that the city is giving the team owners. And for those of us who are a little older, this is really something that was developed by Sam Rappaport, who was a landlord in Center City, a slumlord, some would say. But what he would do is he would buy up properties and then he wouldn't fix them up. He would let them deteriorate. And then he would go back to the city and say, look, don't raise my taxes. The properties are in such bad shape, they're not worth what you say they are. And he would purposely neglect them until they got to the point where he could demolish them. And that's the site of the convention center. And some people would call it shock doctrine. In other countries, what would happen is the World Bank would step in, loan money, make sure the money couldn't be repaid, and then come in and privatize things. In this case, going back many administrations, really starting with Mayor Nutter, that property, the Disney Quest Toll, which is on the other side of Market Street, there was no planning for what we can do to rebuild Market Street East. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse until we get to the point where someone like the owners of the Sixers can step in, like the World Bank steps in, and say, well, look, this is a really bad area. We don't have anything here. We're failing miserably here. Give us the land and we'll build you an arena. And as the former assistant city solicitor said, it's really just an example of not a planning commission, but a gift to billionaires. Because we didn't plan for it, because we didn't do anything else, now the billionaires are allowed to say, the neighborhood isn't working. Look at all the problems on Market Street East, which are real. And we'll solve that by making them worse. We'll do away with the residential component. We will do away with organic growth in a neighborhood, and we will build an arena there, and they will lie about who's going to ride SEPTA. Again, those of us who are a little older remember when the convention center was built, they told us not to worry about the traffic because everyone was going to take public transit to the car show and the flower show and the trade shows. And there are some very interesting shows at the convention center, depending upon your interest. Maybe it's the game shows, or maybe it's the car show or the flower show. But we know that most people drive to it. And one of the ways we know that is City Council had to pass a law to stop the parking garages from price gouging for certain shows. Used to be the parking garages around the convention center, flower show, car show, would go from $20 to park to $50 to park. And the city council had to step in and stop that. And that's because all the projections of all the people who are going to take public transit to these shows turned out to be wrong. And all the projections that say people are going to take public transit, which is in very bad shape right now, to take public transit to the Sixers game late at night are really just misleading us. It's not going to happen. If you think about it for more than a second, if most of the people who can afford season tickets are not the typical SEPTA riders, and if you're not a typical SEPTA rider, how likely are you to walk through those tunnels at 11:30, 12:30, 1 in the morning to try and get on the L or to try and get on the Broad Street line? Most of us who are not users of SEPTA would feel uncomfortable using it. So all those things go together to open up the opportunity for the team owners to take advantage of the city, to take advantage of us. Through neglect, through misleading statements, through huge tax breaks, land breaks, and then they give a little bit of it back and they say, look at what we're giving you. And the answer is, I'll do that all the time. If the city wants to give me $1 billion, I'll give them $50 million back. Heck, I'll be more generous. The city wants to give me $1 billion, I'll give them $500 million back. I still get to put $500 million in my pocket. And that's what the arena deal is. Mm-hmm. Team owners get roughly $500 million in tax breaks. They get land that we can't put a value on because we don't really know. No one's done an estimate of what that street is worth. And of that $500,000 in tax breaks, they give 50 million back. So they pocket $450 million in a gift from the city and say, here's your community benefit agreement.
And they still haven't really addressed the main issue I had regarding SEPTA, which is the regional rail lines. After 10:30 at night, if I want to go to a game, or if Chris is covering a game, and it is, especially if it goes to overtime, there is no train, there is no regional rail line that will take him from Philadelphia to Wilmington after 10:30. And and no one's addressed that problem.
Right. I want to underline that point because you're absolutely right. Some people say, well, they'll just put more cars on, like what they do for the Eagles games or what they do for the playoffs for the Phillies. But that's not possible with the regional rail lines. It is true that you can do that for the Broad Street line and you can do that for the L. You can put a couple of game trains on or concert trains on. But as soon as you think about how the regional rail lines work, it is literally impossible to do the same thing that you do for the subway or the Broad Street line or the L, because the regional rail is not centralized. It goes to all these different places. It stops late at night. It stops early in the evening. There isn't a night owl train, and there can't be because there isn't enough density going to the same place. It would be one thing if there were 100,000 people going from the arena to Wilmington, but that's not what happens. There's, let's say, 50,000 people getting out, and they're not, 5,000 are going to Wilmington, 5,000 are going to Willow Grove, 5,000 are going to New Jersey. It's so spread out that it is impossible for SEPTA to run one train to serve all of it. So your point should have been understood by anyone who said, well, SEPTA will be able to do this. SEPTA cannot do it if it's using regional rail lines. It can only do it to run a train as they do for the subway, as they do for the Eagles game or the Phillies game. People will drive. That's what will happen. Giving the season ticket owners a pass to ride SEPTA. When you look at how much it costs to ride SEPTA and you look at what it costs to have a season pass, it's so far apart that it's not really a benefit. You're talking about giving someone $25 compared to what the season tickets cost. It's not even window dressing. It's insulting window dressing.
Yep. And in some ways predictable, I guess. Even a larger CBA still wouldn't cover the needs of that area, considering they're not getting all the money. So the original 50 million CBA, more than half of that money was going for citywide projects. So it wasn't even all going to Chinatown.
To be specific, it was going to citywide projects that were among the pet projects of the mayor. And that brings up another point that I still don't understand. You are the mayor of the poorest big city in the United States. You know that no matter where this arena goes, it's going to cause some economic disruption in a place that's already got enough economic disruption for everybody in the world. You know this. And $50 million is all you negotiate. Even though I have since learned how to negotiate my own car payments, even I would know that if you're coming into my community and you want to put an arena somewhere where it's going to cause economic disruption and it's going to cause disruption in neighborhoods and all of those different things, the bidding for me is going to start at $500 million. That is where we're going to start. You might be able to negotiate me down, but you're not going to negotiate me too far down. I'm not going far away from 500 million. I'm trying to get 3 is the sweet spot. And I'm trying to get to 3. You might get that $200 million lopped off, but you're not going to get $3 million lopped off. You're going to have to, you're going to have to pay a lot more substantial money than $50 million, especially since you are a team that's worth $4 billion, and B, you're paying your starting center who's hurt half the time $148 million extension. If you can afford to give Joel Embiid $148 million to camp out of shape most of the time and not really be all that useful when he is on the court because he's hurt, if you can pay $148 million for that, you should have been able to give the city at least $200 million at the absolute least, the absolute floor for this project.
1% of the value of the building, they're saying it's going to cost 1.5 billion. 1% of that would be 150 million.
Mm-hmm. Which
So,
is close to the extension they just gave Embiid.
right.
It's
So
not
we're
like
talking,
you don't have it.
they asked for 1/3 of 1% of the value and waived the property taxes, which are at roughly 4%, and the use and occupancy taxes, which are roughly at 3%, and got less 0.003% back. Great
Yeah.
deal for the team owners. Just shows you how they became billionaires.
Yeah. And meanwhile, this construction starts in what, 2026, which, by the way, is also the year, the Jubilee year here in Philadelphia, where they're trying to get all these events going. So Center City will be a construction site. But I keep looking at these numbers. I don't see enough to sustain those businesses. I just don't see it. So in 2027, what does Chinatown look like a year after this process starts?
Well, unfortunately, I think we can look at what happened in Washington, D.C. and project it, which is it will be almost impossible for the Chinatown as we know it to survive. Now, I do believe some of the people who are fighting will be headed to court because I think there are a couple of points. One, the Planning Commission didn't meet in person. They met virtually, and they did that to stop the people from speaking up. When it's a virtual meeting, it's very easy to shut down protesters, to stop people from holding signs, to stop people from influencing their appointed or elected officials. The whole point of a Planning Commission meeting and the Sunshine Act is to allow the public to participate. When the Planning Commission decides it's going to hold a virtual meeting, what it's deciding is to shut the public out. So I think that's one viable legal challenge. The other is the continual statements from the city and the mayor's office saying there's no public subsidy involved was so dishonest that you can actually say, if people knew what the truth was, would people have changed their testimony at the council hearings? Would more people have shown up? Would more people do what Denise has talked about, and that is to lobby their council people and say, I don't want to give these billionaires a subsidy. I'd rather give the subsidy to the people working at the drugstores or going to work in landscaping businesses. So I think that's another viable legal challenge, that for council to have meaningful hearings, what they're discussing, they have to have the actual numbers. You can't hold a hearing and say, we're going to lie to you about what's in the bill, hold the hearing, and then vote, and then turn around later and say, well, yeah, we didn't tell you about these subsidies. We didn't tell you we were giving them the land. We didn't tell you that they don't have to pay anything, lease payments, but we did have a public hearing. So I think that's another option. I'm not sure we're done with this yet. I think we'll have to wait and see, because none of the legal challenges, I don't believe, can be filed until after city council's vote tomorrow. And I do agree with both you and Denise that it is unlikely that anyone who voted yes has changed their mind in the last week.
Right.
If anything, well, the one person who was out there who didn't show up to vote, Councilmember Brooks, maybe she'll show up to vote this time on it.
Well,
I don't really know why she didn't show up. I don't know if she was under some pressure not to show up and didn't want to vote. I do want to think that there are some council members who took very risky votes. Councilmember Young, Councilmember Landau voted against it. And they're in a position where their seats are not nearly as safe as some of the other council people. And there may be retribution from the Sixers, from the mayor's office, from the unions to go after these council members. And I'd just like to point out that it takes some level of bravery to stand up to the money of the unions, to stand up to the money of the billionaire class, to stand up to the power of the mayor's office. If you're a council person, especially Councilmember Young, who's in Center City, who was adamantly opposed to it. And, we'll have to see whether he's rewarded for his having a backbone for standing up for people, or whether he's attacked. Now, I did hear, I don't know that this is true, but I did hear at the Pennsylvania Society, the building trades already had a picture of the council members who voted against them with X's through them to try and get them removed.
Well,
I heard that too.
To be fair to Kendra Brooks, Kendra has been a consistent no vote on this project. I don't think that she was out of council because she was scared of taking the vote, because she's taken the vote before. Not to mention the fact that she also wasn't at a committee at a whole meeting earlier in the week that was focused on education, which is her thing. So there was probably some other reason she wasn't in council rather than fear. And I think she'll probably be there tomorrow and continue to be opposed to this. I mean, she's issued press releases saying that, the $20 million that the mayor's office is giving toward this is just trying to, put lipstick on this pig of a bad deal and stuff. So I don't think that she necessarily didn't come to vote because she was afraid. She was probably sick or something. I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt on that.
And I certainly hope you're right. The Inquirer editorial board did not give her the same benefit of the doubt. And I
Well,
obviously,
the day that the Inquirer or editorial board gives anybody the benefit of the doubt will be the first time.
right, and I certainly don't know why she missed the vote. But I'm hoping that you're right, that there was an explanation other than she didn't want to show up in anger on the people who support the candidacies.
Right. So, Lance, let's shift a little bit here. And yesterday in the Homeowner newsletter, you talked about what I've been calling ethical shopping. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's a good segue, because while we know that this was a gift to the billionaires who own the Sixers, during the holiday seasons, we get a lot of emails, or I get a lot of emails, I'm assuming everyone else does, asking for donate to this charity, donate to that charity. What can you do? And we also get some political emails, donate to this candidate, donate to that candidate. And a lot of it talks about the unequal income distribution in America. And when we shop for holiday gifts, I know there's some segment of us who say, don't buy anything. And I'm not going to address that issue, because if that's where you are, that's where you are. But if you are holiday shopping, you are taking money that you have earned and you are deciding what to buy with it. And this, what I'm going to go through, actually comes from the Teamsters, a labor union out in California, which is saying buy locally. And they go through 10 points. The reason I'm talking about it after we talked about the gift to the owners of the Sixers is because this is really a way that those of us who are concerned about income distribution, those of us who are tired of seeing billionaires buy up government, seeing Elon Musk decide who the next president should be, to see all of these billionaires buy up offices. Here's something that we can do to take a little money, not a lot, but a little money out of their pocket and give it to our neighborhoods. And it's buying locally from an independent store. And there are 10 points that the union goes through. They say buying locally has local character and prosperity. In an increasing homogenized world, communities that preserve their one-of-a-kind businesses and distinctive character have an economic edge. If you are somebody who is an expert at what you do, you probably don't need a salesperson to help you figure out what it is that's going to suit your purposes. But most of us aren't experts in everything. And the reason why we go to an independent store is because an independent store puts the product on their shelf that they believe serves their public. Walmart, Target, whoever you want to talk about, their buyer is a corporate buyer who's buying for the entire chain. And they're buying based on price and what their profit margins are. They're not looking at their community and saying, you know, in Philadelphia, which has a winter, when you go to buy something, you might want to think about what the weather's like, or we know what our population is, or we know what our community's like. So the local store is putting their shelves filled with things that they think are appropriate for us. And when you go in there, you can talk to them and say, look, I'm buying a present for a young friend of mine. He's just turned 4. What would he like? What would he like that's a little unusual? He loves cars, so I want to do that. But is there anything else that you would recommend? And the store owner says, you know, we've got this really interesting toy that a 4-year-old could play with in the back seat of the car. So he isn't quite so annoying on those long trips.
Which, by the way, he has been playing with a lot.
Okay. But if I go into Target, or I go into Walmart, or I even go online and shop, there's nobody to have that conversation with. There's nobody who can help me figure out what it is that I want. Same thing is unfortunately true for computers. Those of us who have to buy computers often don't know enough to understand what the difference is. Now, as the independent computer stores have closed, there's really no one to go in and talk to. So I can go and talk to the Apple store and ask them whether I should buy an Apple or I should buy a PC. And I don't think anyone's surprised when they tell me I should buy an Apple. So that's part of it. The Teamsters also say there's local decision-making, which we talked about. It keeps the local economy going. So when you shop at Target, Walmart, or online, the money doesn't stay here. The money doesn't recirculate in our community. For those, again, who are in my age bracket, they probably remember a time when there were no billionaires. There were wealthy people, but no billionaires. And there were many independent businesses where people were upper middle class. That used to be an expression we used, upper middle class, meaning not working class, but people who were doing better than working class. And these are people who owned shoe stores. They owned tailor shops. They owned clothing stores, furniture stores. They were local people who did well running their independent stores. And they recirculated that money in the community. They sponsored our Little League teams. Those of us who grew up in more rural areas probably had on the back of our baseball uniform or our football uniform the local store, whether it was the furniture store or the clothing store. It didn't really matter. Sometimes it was even the barbershop. But there was a community that was prospering. The local person was buying locally. They were hiring a local company to fix up their kitchen, and the money recirculated. When Mr. Bezos gets money, it's true he's buying another jet. This will be number 5 or 6, I've lost count, or another yacht, which again, I've lost count, or another vacation home, which I've lost count. But it's not here in Philadelphia. We don't get the benefit of spending our own money here. So we don't keep the money local when we shop from the corporate large stores or we shop online. The other thing is a lot of people think that if you shop locally, the people who work in those stores aren't making the same as they're making at Target. Now, I don't know where that idea comes from because it's often not true. Many of the local stores are hiring expertise. So one of my favorite stores to shop at, I know Denise has shopped there as well, is Fonte's. Fonte's is a high-end kitchen store. Unbelievably, my wife and I lost a knife. Now, I don't know how someone does that, but we lost a serrated knife. All I can think of is somehow we threw it out by accident. So I don't know much about knives. So I go to Fonte's and I say, I need a serrated knife to cut tomatoes. The guy says, let me bring you to the knife section. Let me show you the 3 knives we have that do that. Let me talk about the price differences, and let me ask you about how often you cook and what do you do, and I will make a recommendation. Now, I certainly could have gone online, tried to find a tomato knife, but I wouldn't have had the same information. So Fonte's pays their staff well because their staff has an expertise. And I get the benefit of that. I get the education. Not only am I buying a knife, but I'm buying an education. I'm getting free learning. And that doesn't happen if you shop at Walmart or you shop at Target or you shop online. So the wages at local store are often better than what they get paid at Target. And anyone who's ever worked at a CVS or a Walgreens or a Target knows that better than I do. Another part is when we shop locally, we're building entrepreneurship. We are building a nation of people who are trying to create to the next level. So if you buy from a big chain store, Best Buy, it's unlikely that when their buyer buys the stereo equipment or buys the television, is shopping for anything other than a white cutout, large, same thing, vanilla. When you go to a local stereo store like Chestnut Hill Audio, there's someone there who loves audio, knows what the different products are, and is shopping to put things on their shelf. Well, that person, when they're calling up their manufacturer, is putting pressure on their manufacturer, not just for price, but on innovation, on better products, on things that we can all benefit from. Target doesn't do that. Walmart doesn't do that. Yeah, they sell stereo equipment, but there's no one there to really fit it to your home. And the buyer isn't trying to talk to the small entrepreneur who's making stereo speakers, or I know there are a lot of people out there who are currently buying turntables or buying amplifiers with tubes again. Not part of my cultural experience, to be honest, but I know that's out there. And I know the people who know a lot about this push the manufacturers to do that. The other thing that we talked about when we talked about the arena is how much of the subsidy there is from taxpayers, how we as residents of Philadelphia are being forced to invest in the arena by paying their share of taxes. Yet, even though we're forced investors, we don't get any return on that investment. And by buying locally, we stop the ability for a large company to force government to kowtow to them. So if you're someone who, again, has watched the Walmarts open up just outside of one town into another town, they do it because they get the benefits, the tax benefits, the breaks. And they can only do that because they're so huge and they have so much money and they have such a political machine that they can force a town or a city to give them tax breaks, as the team owners have done to the city of Philadelphia. So when we shop locally, we're levelizing that power. We're saying a local store doesn't have the ability to call up the mayor's people and say, hey, I'll build a 100,000 square foot mega store, but only if you waive all my taxes. The local store has to play by the rules. And so by rewarding people who play by the rules, we are being more democratic. We are saying that we believe that democracy shouldn't be for sale. And another point is, if we buy locally, we are concentrating the business district. We're making our neighborhoods more enjoyable, but we're also cutting down on the amount of cars and driving. We're also being environmentally smart. The worst thing for the environment is urban sprawl. The more we get in our cars and drive to the malls, the more the world is designed so that we have to do that, the worse it is for the environment. And again, just 2 more quick points. I want to underline, none of these are things that I wrote. None of these, although I agree with them, and I'd like to think I could have written them, but these all come from the Teamsters, a labor union. This is what they're telling their members. They're telling their members, stay out of the Walmarts, stay out of the Targets, don't shop online. Do something to help your own community. So again, we talked about it a little bit. If you believe competition keeps prices down, and we're seeing that we're going to be challenged in the new administration to see whether mergers are going to be stopped or not. But the recent merger of two large supermarkets was stopped because the studies showed that they would end competition and actually drive down the price of labor. So shopping locally builds competition. It helps people compete on a level playing field, and it makes it better in terms of letting a small business enter into the marketplace to sell their things. And that's the final point, the product diversity. So if you want to make something, whatever it is, mugs for coffee that heat themselves, or plates that are easier to clean, or a knife that cuts tomatoes better, it's very hard for you to get into the Walmarts, to get into the Targets to sell your product. So what you do is you have an opportunity, if there are a lot of independent stores, to sell that way. And the best example of that is why we have a lot of distilleries in the state of Pennsylvania. The state liquor store system gives an advantage to local breweries, I should say distilleries. I guess it's obvious I'm not that much of a connoisseur of the state stores, but local wineries and local distilleries have an advantage because the Pennsylvania state store system, although I think we call it wine and spirit now, right? You can't call it state stores anymore.
Yeah, it's wine.
But they buy
fried wine
locally.
and spirit.
There was just an article about Jacqueline's Liquor, which is in the heart of Philadelphia, going through a resurgence. And that resurgence is based upon the wine and spirit store stocking their items. You go into Reading Terminal, there's a whole section that's been set up by law with the Pennsylvania state store system that allows them to sell locally produced wines, locally produced spirits, and some things that I don't really understand what they are, but apparently you can buy mixed drinks in cans now. So these are all examples of how, if there's a smaller person to sell to, if you don't have to sell to Costco, if you don't have to sell to Walmart's, then it's easier for a small business to get their way in the door to start building. And that starting to build builds competition between products and makes it easier for people to have a competitive marketplace with ideas. And that's kind of where we are. That's why I say this holiday season, if you are someone who enjoys buying gifts, by all means, think about putting your politics, your beliefs, the love of your neighborhood, think about what community you want to live in, and then think about where you want to shop. It's easy to shop at Walmart. It's easy to shop online at Amazon. Seems like it's a better deal sometimes, but every time you buy at Amazon, it's pressure on the store in your shopping district to close. And eventually, if more of us buy from Amazon, those stores will not exist. And once those stores don't exist, the store
Hey, that was Lance Haver, Denise, and Larry with the Philadelphia Hall Monitor. Video got cut off there for a second, but we're going to move on to our next segment. I'm Vanessa Maria Graber, and I went to the rally and march protecting Sanctuary, where immigrants' rights organizers from all over the city and city council member Rue Landau convened on City Hall to demand that Mayor Parker protect and maintain Philadelphia's sanctuary city status. And here is
My name is Erika Guadalupe Nunez. I'm the director of Juntos. And we are here today outside the Philly ICE office as part of our rally and march. One, to demand Cheryl Parker's administration take a clear stance to defend sanctuary in Philadelphia, which means publicly declaring that we are numerous members of our community, not only from our sister organization Viet Lead, but also from Juntos, where immigrant community members are currently being detained at Mo Shannon, which is the largest detention center in Pennsylvania. It's run, an entire Northeast actually, and it's also the only private prison detention center. And we know that these detentions are only going to increase under Trump, and we know that as part of that, our community is going to continue to suffer human rights violations, and more than what we want more than anything is their release and the closing of all these detention centers in the coming years, and that's what we're going to committed to fighting for.
And what are you telling participants of today's action to do?
Yeah, there were three really clear steps today. One is for our brother Peng at Viet Lead to sign his petition, and also to call for our brother One at Viet Lead to call his representative Mary Gay Scallon in their Chestnut office, asking them to liberate him from Mo Shannon. So those are two members from Viet Lead. You can find information on how to support them on their socials. And then for us, one of our members was just picked up 7 days ago, last Tuesday. His name is Victor. We launched a petition that you'll be able to find on our social media as well, asking folks to sign it so that we can stay his deportation and reopen his case.
Are you hopeful that Mayor Parker will listen to your calls to action today?
I'm always hopeful that when the movement makes clear what they want, that will come to fruition.
Thank you so much. Can you tell folks how they can find your organization?
Yeah, Juntos can be found on Instagram, VAMOS_JUNTOS_ Vamos Juntos. If you visit us there, you'll be able to find information not only about the individual campaigns, Sanctuary School, and also the planned work ahead to defend our communities from detention and deportation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Vivian Chang. I am with Asian Americans United. We are an organization dedicated to building the power of immigrant communities.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Vivian Chang y trabajo con Asian Americans United. Somos una organización comunitaria dedicada a construir el poder de las comunidades inmigrantes.
As we all know, and as you just heard, we are facing threats from a second Trump administration. And Philadelphia must protect all of its residents, not just some of them. It was the first Trump presidency that pushed Philly to become a sanctuary city, facing a xenophobic president who banned Muslims from coming here in the very first month in office. Shame, yeah, that's right. Shame on him, shame on, yeah. When we knew that we had to take serious steps to protect our people, and that means affirming sanctuary city status and much more. Trump has promised mass deportations and rounding up of immigrants. He has promised to expel people from this country and make sure it is filled with more hatred for anyone who challenges him. And yet already, more than 20 states in the US have passed laws that attacked immigrants, whether restricting them from owning property, working at universities, or just seeing themselves and their cultures reflected in curriculum. Shame. The United States banned all Asian immigrants for almost 100 years under the Chinese Exclusion Act. Now it's already moving back to that era. This is truly an existential threat, and Philadelphia needs to treat it like one.
My name is Julio, and I'm with the Pennsylvania Immigration Coalition. I want to start off by acknowledging that my parents are immigrants. They're from Guerrero, Mexico. And I say that because they were lucky. They were here at the right place at the right time during the '86 Immigration and Control Act during the last amnesty. So one day they were undocumented, the next day they weren't. And today I'm here to ask Mayor Parker to reaffirm Philadelphia's sanctuary city policy. Immigrants urgently need to hear where the city stands. There are only 41 days left before the next president begins his awful plans, which we've heard, but I'm going to repeat. Mass deportations, revoking birthright citizenship, and denaturalizing citizens. Mayor, the immigrants are asking you, we are asking you to stand by your promise that you made before and after you were elected. This ambiguity is unacceptable. The mayor was grateful that the city became recertified as a welcoming city. In September, her office gave a proclamation for Welcoming Week. So depending on the month, she's pro-immigrant. But this is not one of those months, so we gotta make sure that she stands up again. All right? So now I wanna reiterate, I talked about the number of immigrants, but I also wanna talk about the fact that immigrants are the only reason why the city continues to grow. Between 2000 and 2022, the US born population dropped by 60,000 here in Philadelphia, but it was increased by 109,000 by immigrants. And that growth is not just demographic. Immigrants make up 20% of all working employees. They pay 17% of the wage tax, 15% of residential property taxes, and 36% of them are small businesses. So I want to make sure people know that, because people often say, oh, well, undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes. They do. And in fact, they don't get access to those benefits, but yet they pay into them. As I mentioned earlier, immigrants should be celebrated and supported every day, not just during select months of the year, because somebody said so, every single day. Legal protections can change overnight. Our commitment must be unwavering. So Mayor, if you support immigrants, then please stand up and say, I am going to support the sanctuary city policy.
I'm honored to be here with you today. Today we come together not just to protect a policy, but to defend a principle. The principle that our city will not be a place of fear, but a place of safety. Yes, sir. Sanctuary is a word that holds more weight now than it has ever before. Immigrant communities have contributed immensely to our city and continue to make our city the vibrant, diverse, welcoming place that it is. Let me be clear, we will not reverse our sanctuary city policy on my watch. Trump has made his intentions to carry out a mass deportation program abundantly clear. And for the estimated 47,000 Philadelphians who are now living in fear that they might face deportation at home, at work, at school, or unfortunately in the custody of the Philadelphia police, their worst fears may soon be realized. This fight to protect and preserve our sanctuary city policies is a fight to protect not just immigrant groups, but Philadelphia as we know it. But I am here today to reaffirm our city's commitment to sanctuary. I will do everything in my power to ensure that public resources will never be used to support federal deportation efforts, track and target people based on their national origin or ethnicity, or enforce discriminatory laws. Tomorrow, we are fighting for the next year and the next 4 years. We are fighting for the protection of people who live here, who call Philadelphia home. They deserve sanctuary in our city.
My name is Seth Anderson Oberman. I'm the Executive Director of Reclaim Philadelphia. And I came out today because it's incredibly important to me that we stand with immigrant communities as we head into this next period. We know, Trump has been very explicit about his intention to deport and attack immigrant communities. Fully stand in full solidarity with immigrant communities in Philadelphia and across the country. They are part of our vibrant working class fabric in this city.